Good morning on Friday morning, August the 23rd. Just want to make a few comments about education in general, and I think I might have jumped the gun on the hello, but anyway, here on Friday morning, August the 23rd, a couple days after President Biden signed the student debt forgiveness executive order, and just want to make a couple of comments on education in general, and we'll get into some of the weeds later on. For several years, actually, I've been suggesting that high school ought to be 5 years instead of four because it just didn't seem like there was enough time to get through everything that an individual perhaps ought to know to function effectively in the world, particularly as we encourage people to get more and more involved in the political system. And there seems to be maybe not less, but not sufficient understanding on the part of all of us regarding the issues at stake when we cast our vote, uh, even on the part perhaps of some of the politicians and leaders who are encouraging us to cast our votes. And I think that one of the problems, even when I was in high school, we didn't make it into the 20th century, but I think there's so much that happened in the 20th century that particularly when it comes to history and recent history, not current events so much, but recent history, there needs to be a way to get more of that information in front of the students. Now, this is assuming, of course, that the students are going to school and are doing the work, et cetera, et cetera. The whole K through 12 and then college slash university system, I think, needs to be revisited as we're hearing so many call for these days. But one of the things I think that we need to do is actually revisit how much of our material in history is being studied and learned and reflected on as students are then graduating and then encouraged to go into the voting booth and make decisions on where we ought to be focusing our energy and investments today as we lay the foundation for the future. If we can learn from the past, then we can hopefully avoid some of the mistakes of the past. And hopefully, as we review what was done in the past, we might realize that some of the things that were done, even if the overall context was bad or even if the overall context was good, some of the things that were done may or may not be good to try again or to repurpose, rethink how they were done, why they worked, why they didn't work, etc. But the only way you can do that is if you have some kind of a broad and in some cases particular understanding of the past. And so the degree to which we simply have more information, more knowledge than we have time to get through in 12 years, that's a problem because then we end up with students in the college, university system, junior college system, wherever they might be, if they go to school beyond high school, who simply don't have a foundation. And if they don't go to school beyond high school, they also don't have a foundation. And I think one of the travesties of education is its failure to encourage people to desire to learn, to continue to want to study, to learn, to gain information, and then to learn in the course of that education how to think through issues, recognize the value in the positions that others hold, even if you don't agree with their ultimate conclusions, but to be able to think logically, to think critically and analytically in a way that allows you to recognize why you believe what you believe and why others believe what they believe and why you disagree, not just because it's different, but what is it about the beliefs that others hold, the arguments that they make, the presumptions from which they are arguing, what is it that they disagree with or that you are simply unaware of that accounts for the differences in the conclusions that you both draw regarding any topic. And if we can learn to talk to each other about those things, then perhaps at the end of the day, we can come to a conclusion that works for everybody and doesn't look like any of the conclusions that we originally brought to the table. And the degree to which education, K through 12, does not facilitate an interest in learning, an ability to think critically, and by critical I mean analytically, not negatively, but critically in the sense of analytically, and an ability to discuss and work through issues, then education, as I understand it, to what it ought to accomplish, is failing. We need to have an education system that encourages learning, encourages the study of new ideas, not because all ideas are equal and not because all beliefs are true, as far as I'm concerned, but because the only way you can determine which ideas are better or worse and which beliefs are more or less true, more or less likely to be true, is to encounter them and to reflect on them in light of the ones that do seem to be more true or more accurate, more factual. And so the degree to which our education system is not encouraging that, it's a problem, particularly as we encounter each other in society and then no longer know how to have a discussion about things that matter. When it becomes a point of no longer simply having a discussion, but it's a matter of making policy decisions by which others are expected to live. Whether we're a manager, or whether we're simply a fellow employee, or whether we're a legislator or president, as we make decisions that impact the lives of other people, are we aware of the basis for the decisions that we make? So, bringing it back to education more specifically, again, I've always felt that, or not always, but for a long time, I have felt that we simply do not require enough in the course of our K through 12 education, and the degree to which what is required and expected in K through 12 education has been cut back over the last several years, the last couple of decades. I think that's a problem as well. The degree to which we have a society that emphasizes play or entertainment over study for children and youth, that's a problem. Those are the years when there will be no better time for people to engage in the learning process. Um, those are the years of life when little else is expected of one other than to learn. And so the degree to which we are not encouraging that, fostering that, and uh, in some cases making that happen as best we can in the context of encouraging and making others study and learn, then we missed the boat, and they'll be hampered until they can recognize for themselves the value of study, the joy of learning, and the willingness develop in their own minds, the willingness to look into ideas more deeply than simply taking the word of somebody they trust or just following their own instinct. I think one of our problems today is we've gone too far in the extreme of saying that the individual is right at any stage of life, failing to recognize that there are things that we all need to learn in the course of life. And if we have never changed our mind about anything, then we probably haven't thought about very much. And given how likely we are to change our mind over the course of our life, um, we ought to take, um, we ought to pause in buying into the idea that individuals of any age are able to make decisions even for themselves, let alone make decisions that impact, determine policies that impact everybody else. But that's another topic for another time. When it comes to education and higher education, people on both sides of the aisle are ranting and raving about the system that's developed, the loan system, and how we've gotten in the last 40 years to skyrocketing college costs and the skyrocketing, this ballooning student loan debt, as a system has been set up not with the interest of education in mind, but with the interest of funding the university system and everybody tied to it. I think another idea I've had for quite a long time is that the degree to which we fund education and offer student loans, etc., those loans ought to be capped based on the value of the degree that's being pursued. Uh, I would love to be a virtual student, but I can't afford to. And certain degrees, certain jobs have a value coming out of college, out of higher education, that are going to result in a higher level of income than other jobs. We can get into the whole income and guaranteed basic income and minimum wage and all that in a different discussion. But at this point, I want to just suggest that it should be obvious that a sociology degree from any school is going to result in different income potential than a medical degree from any school. The degree to which our loan structure, and I don't know the details of how student loans are structured now. It's been a long time since I've had to deal with that system myself. But the degree to which our student loans are simply given because somebody's in school with no consideration about what they're in school for, that's a problem. There ought to be a cap of some sort, it seems like, that is tied to the income potential of the degree that's being pursued. So you may want a degree in the sociology of, middle-aged peasants, but there probably aren't going to be too many job opportunities for that. There probably isn't going to be too much income potential for that. So if you find a place where you can tailor a degree plan to yield that degree, that's great. But to what degree should anybody be expected to fund that, as opposed to pursuing a degree in law or in medicine, et cetera, where income potential based upon the successful completion of one's training is very high. And so the degree to which we offer student loans, to what degree are those loans offered with recognition of the value of the degree that's being pursued? Another issue is this idea that, all college degrees are equal. The degree to which instructors are working in fields that yield high salary outcomes, should that be a factor in how instructors are compensated? It may be. I don't know off the top of my head. But the idea that you're a teacher, you should be making X, or have been a teacher for 20 years, you should be making Y, without any consideration of the value of the field that you are teaching in an economic sense to the overall economy and business world when your students graduate. Why wouldn't that be considered in the compensation scheme? And I'm not saying that the sociology teacher and the medical doctor teaching at the medical school aren't equally passionate about their fields. My question concerns to what degree does the work of each of those individuals contribute in an economic sense to the future earning of the individuals that they are teaching and the community and society of which those individuals will be a part. And I'm not even making a judgment claim as to whether the value of the sociology teacher and the subject of sociology and the value of medicine are any different. That's a different discussion. I'm simply saying that when we're talking about loans, when we're talking about paying for school, that's an economic issue. And why are we not prioritizing economic concerns and considerations as we try to determine what is being paid and how people would be supported in the pursuit of those goals? So there's a few other issues I'd like to talk about, but as pretty much always, I've gone longer than I wanted to in talking about this. So there's a couple of ideas. I'd like to hear your response and your ideas back on those. And then later on, we'll touch base on some more ideas in part based on what you have to say to me in response to the ideas I've just put forth. So anyway, thank you all very much. Appreciate your time and appreciate you working through this topic with me as we go forward. Thanks. Bye-bye.